A new mother wakes to her family dog pressing himself against the crib every night at exactly 2:13 a.m. And she thinks it's just instinct until she puts a camera on the nursery. What the footage catches is small, quiet, and impossible to ignore. A shadow moving where no one should be. Cops come, officials shrug, and suddenly the people meant to protect a baby sound like they're protecting something else. The dog won't stop guarding, and the family's quiet life cracks open into a dangerous, ugly secret that reaches farther than they imagined. Someone trusted is hiding the truth. And now the family is the one under attack. Will one frightened parent and a wounded dog be enough to force the truth out before the people with power bury it for good? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The digital clock's red numbers pierced the darkness. 2:20 a.m. Rowan jolted awake at the sound of Biscuit's heavy panting outside the nursery door. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers slipping twice before she managed to grasp it. She clicked open the video she'd recorded earlier, the screen's harsh blue light illuminating her fear-stricken face in the darkened room. The timestamp read 2:13 a.m. On the screen, Biscuit's massive shepherd mix frame charged the crib, his muscular body tensing before he slammed against it repeatedly with deliberate force. The hollow thump echoed through the tinny phone speaker as Rowan's fingers trembled, leaving smudges on the glass. She watched his desperate pawing at the hardwood floor near Jonah's crib, claws scratching frantically as if trying to dig through to something below. The floorboard there looked different now. Slightly raised at one edge, the ancient varnish cracked, as if something beneath had worked it loose from underneath. "What do you see, boy?" she whispered, running her hand over his grizzled fur, feeling the tension in his body. Biscuit's torn ear twitched at the sound of her voice, but his eyes remained fixed on the spot he'd been so fixated on earlier, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Jonah's whimper, thin and vulnerable, drew her attention to the crib. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and lifted her 6-week-old son, cradling him close against her chest as she paced the nursery. The floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet, each sound making her flinch. "Shh, baby mama's here. Nothing's going to hurt you." His tiny fingers, pink and perfect, curled around her thumb as she hummed softly, a lullaby her own mother used to sing, trying to shake off the chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn air and everything to do with the dread pooling in her stomach. Hours passed as she sat in the rocking chair, unable to put Jonah down or leave the room. Biscuit remained at her feet, his large body pressed against her. Legs! Alert even as his eyes grew heavy. The sky outside the nursery window was beginning to lighten, streaks of pale gray pushing back the night, when she heard the front door unlock at exactly 6 o'clock. Silas's heavy work boots clomped down the hallway, a familiar rhythm that should have been comforting but only highlighted how abnormal everything else felt. "You're still up?" he asked from the doorway, his broad shoulders slumping with exhaustion beneath his oil-stained work jacket. Dark circles rimmed his bloodshot eyes from another long night shift at the plant. A smudge of grease marked his left cheekbone. "Biscuit was acting strange again?" Rowan said quietly, not wanting to disturb the finally sleeping Jonah, his breath warm and steady against her collarbone. "He was throwing himself at the crib, Silas. I got it on video this time. You have to see it to understand." Silas ran a hand over his face, his wedding ring catching the first rays of morning sun. "Honey, you need sleep. The dog's probably just being protective of the baby. You know how he's been since we brought Jonah home. He thinks he's the guardian of the universe." "It's more than that." She stood carefully, legs stiff from sitting so long, and laid Jonah in his crib with practiced gentleness. Look at this floorboard. It's loose now. See how it's raised? Biscuit was trying to tell us something. He knows something we don't. What he's telling us is that he needs better training, Silas sighed, leaning against the doorframe. And you need rest. You can't keep doing this every night, Ro. Your eyes are more bloodshot than mine, and I'm the one who just worked 12 hours straight. Don't dismiss this, Rowan whispered fiercely, her auburn hair falling loose from her ponytail as she pointed to the floor. Something's wrong. I can feel it in my bones, and so can Biscuit. He's never acted like this before, not even during thunderstorms. What's wrong is that you're exhausted. New moms need sleep, Rowan. It's not healthy to stay up all night watching dog videos and imagining the worst. His voice softened, concern replacing frustration. Dr. Kelly said to watch for signs of postpartum anxiety, remember? She pulled out her phone, shoving it toward him. Just watch it. This isn't in my head, Silas. Silas squinted at the screen, his work-roughened hands looking oversized against the phone as he watched Biscuit's frantic behavior. The furrow between his brows deepened. He's probably hearing mice in the walls or something. Old houses make noise. Remember last summer when we thought someone was breaking in and it was just that branch scraping the window? Mice don't make our dog act like this. Rowan's jaw set stubbornly, a familiar determination hardening her features. I'm getting a camera. Tonight. This ends now. A camera? We can't afford… I'm using my tip money from last month. She cut him off, arms crossed over her chest. I need to know what's happening in here, at night. I won't sleep until I do. Silas's shoulders sagged further, defeat written in every line of his body. Fine, but promise me you'll try to sleep when Jonah sleeps? Please? I'm worried about you both. Rowan nodded, though they both knew she wouldn't rest until she understood what was causing Biscuit's behavior. After Silas headed to bed, his footsteps heavy with resignation, she waited until his soft snores drifted down the hall. Then she bundled Jonah into his car seat, tucking his favorite blue blanket around him, and drove to the nearest electronics store. Biscuit's watchful eyes followed their every move from the back seat, his breath fogging the window as he kept vigilant guard. The sales clerk, a pimply young man with an oversized name tag reading Kevin, recommended an expensive system with multiple cameras and cloud storage. His sales pitch died on his lips when he saw the determination in Rowan's eyes and the sleeping infant in the car seat. Rowan settled for a basic nanny cam that would record motion and sound, its practical black casing unremarkable but functional. It was small enough to hide on the bookshelf, with a clear view of both the crib and that suspicious floorboard. Back home, she positioned the camera carefully between a stuffed giraffe and a board book about counting ducks, double-checking its angle on her phone screen. Biscuit sat at attention nearby, his muscles tense, watching her work with an intensity that was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. Whatever was wrong, at least her faithful guardian would be there, ready to protect them both with his life if necessary. Okay, boy, she whispered, patting his head, feeling the softness of his ears between her fingers. Let's see what you've been trying to tell us. She pressed record, the tiny red light blinking steadily in the corner of the nursery, like a silent promise. The truth would be revealed, one way or another. The nanny cam's infrared glow cast a faint red sheen across the nursery at 2:13 a.m. Through the camera's lens, a dark figure emerged from below, pushing up through the loose floorboard like a nightmare made real. The man's movements were practiced, deliberate, as he slithered through the opening and toward the crib. His shadow stretched long across the pale blue walls, distorting into something monstrous as he navigated between the stuffed animals scattered on the floor. Relics of Jonah's first months of life. His gloved hand reached between the bars, inches from Jonah's sleeping form, when Biscuit's massive form launched into frame. The shepherd mix's teeth flashed in the darkness, a deep growl rumbling through the nursery like distant thunder. The intruder jerked back, his body tensing in sudden fear, retreating through the floor like a shadow being sucked into the void, leaving behind only a disturbed blanket that had fallen from the crib. Rowan's scream pierced the night, shattering the silence of their suburban home. She burst into Silas's room, her heart hammering against her ribs, shaking him awake with trembling hands that couldn't seem to stay still. "Someone's in the house! The basement! He came through the floor! He tried to touch Jonah!" Her voice cracked with raw terror, tears threatening to spill. Silas bolted upright, instantly alert, sleep vanishing from his tired eyes. "What? Where's Jonah? Is he hurt?" His large hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. "He's safe. Biscuit stopped him. I got it all on camera. The dog knew. He knew before any of us. Come see?" She pulled at his arm with desperate urgency, already backing toward the door. They huddled in the kitchen at 3:30 a.m., the harsh overhead light making them both look ghastly pale as they watched the footage for the third time on Rowan's phone. Silas's hands shook as he held the device, his thumb hovering over the play button as if afraid to witness it again. The blue light of the screen illuminated the deep worry lines etched around his mouth. "I'm calling 911. This is beyond anything I imagined." While they waited for the police, Biscuit stood guard at the nursery door, his muscular body tense and ready, his torn ear twitching at every sound. The settling of the house, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the occasional passing car. His grizzled fur caught the hallway light, giving him an almost supernatural appearance. Rowan clutched Jonah to her chest, refusing to put him down, inhaling the sweet baby powder scent of his hair, and silently thanking whatever instinct had led her to rescue Biscuit years ago. 2 patrol cars arrived at 4:15 a.m., their lights painting the street in alternating red and blue, transforming their quiet neighborhood into an emergency zone. Lieutenant Harmon, a weathered officer with salt and pepper hair and hands marked by decades of service, led the inspection of the nursery. His boots creaked against the wooden floor as he moved methodically through the space, examining every corner. The perp accessed the house through this loose board? He knelt, examining the floor with his flashlight, the beam catching dust particles dancing in the air. "Connects straight to your basement? How long has this been loose?" "Yes," Rowan said, bouncing slightly to keep Jonah asleep. "I'm not sure when it got that way. Biscuit knew something was wrong. He'd been trying to warn us for weeks, scratching at that spot, barking at the floor. I thought he was just being paranoid." Her voice hitched. "I should have listened sooner." The officers pried up the floorboard with a crowbar, revealing a narrow passage into the darkness below. The beam of their tactical flashlights cut through the shadows, exposing the secret path. They found fresh shoe prints in the basement's dirt floor, perfectly preserved like fossil evidence of the violation of their home. "We'll need this board for evidence," Lieutenant Harmon said, bagging it carefully in a clear plastic evidence bag, labeling it with practiced efficiency. "And a copy of that video footage. Did the camera capture his face at any point?" Rowan emailed him the file while he took their statement, her fingers tapping frantically on her phone screen. His expression remained professionally neutral as she described Biscuit's previous behavior and her growing suspicions over the past month. The scratching, the midnight alerts, the inexplicable anxiety that had gripped the normally stoic dog. "We'll investigate," he said finally, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. "But I recommend installing better security systems immediately. Motion sensors, window alarms, maybe consider staying somewhere else for a few days? With family, perhaps?" His suggestion hung in the air, heavy with unspoken concern. "No," Rowan said firmly, her jaw set in defiance. "We're staying right here tomorrow night. I want to catch whoever's doing this. They're not driving us from our home." She straightened her back, the maternal instinct to protect transforming her exhaustion into steel resolve. Silas rubbed his temples, the conflict evident in the tightness around his eyes. "Rowan, maybe we should listen to the lieutenant, just for a night or two, until we can make the house more secure." "We're staying," she insisted, cutting him off with a fierceness that surprised even her. "This is our home. I won't let someone drive us out of it. I won't teach Jonah that we run when threatened." She shifted the sleeping baby higher against her shoulder, as if physically shielding him from her husband's suggestion. Lieutenant Harmon handed them his card, the edges worn as if he'd handed out thousands just like it. "Call immediately if anything else happens. We'll increase patrols in your area for the next few nights. And Mrs. Mitchell, trust your instincts. And your dogs, apparently." After the police left, their cruisers taking the urgent blue and red lights with them, Rowan and Silas sat at the kitchen table, neither speaking. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each second they sat in stunned disbelief. Jonah slept peacefully in his mother's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, unaware of the danger he'd been in. Biscuit lay at their feet, his amber eyes tracking every movement, alert despite the late hour, his loyalty a tangible force in the room. "I tried to tell you something was wrong," Rowan finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, fatigue making the words heavy. "For weeks now, the way Biscuit kept acting, the strange sounds." "I know." Silas reached across the table, squeezing her hand, his calloused palm warm against her cold fingers. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. I thought it was just new parent anxiety. But are you sure about staying? We could go to my brother's place just until—" "Whoever this is, they've been watching us. They knew exactly when to come, when we'd be deeply asleep." Rowan's voice grew stronger with conviction. "We need to be here to stop them. I won't spend another night wondering if someone's coming for my baby." Silas nodded slowly, resignation and determination warring in his expression. "Then we'll take shift sleeping. I'll stay up first. And first thing tomorrow, I'm buying better locks, security cameras, motion sensors, whatever we need." His hand tightened around hers. "No one's getting near Jonah again." "And you believe me now? About Biscuit?" She glanced down at the dog, who hadn't left their side since the incident. "That dog saved our son tonight." Silas leaned down to pat Biscuit's head, his fingers lingering on the scarred ear. "He's not leaving that nursery again. Ever." The dog leaned into his touch, a silent agreement passing between them. They spent the rest of the night in Jonah's room, a makeshift family campout with blankets on the floor and Biscuit positioned between them and the door. They watched the sun rise through the window, painting the room in gentle gold that belied the night's terror. The loose floorboard was gone, but its absence left a dark hole in the floor, a ragged mouth in the polished wood, a reminder of how close they'd come to tragedy. Rowan held Jonah tighter against her chest, feeling his heartbeat alongside her own, grateful for Biscuit's protection and determined to uncover who would dare threaten her child. As daylight strengthened, so did her resolve. Whoever had invaded their home had made the gravest mistake of their life. The next evening dragged by with agonizing slowness. Rowan and Silas took turns napping, neither willing to sleep deeply. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the windows had them jolting upright, hearts racing. Biscuit remained their constant sentinel, his massive shepherd mix frame positioned strategically between potential entrances and the nursery. Amber eyes tracking every movement, ears pricked forward at the slightest sound. "Try to get some real sleep," Silas murmured around midnight, his tall frame slumped with exhaustion in the nursery doorway. "I'll keep watch for a while." Rowan shook her head, auburn hair falling loose from her hastily tied ponytail. I can't. Not until we know what's happening. Her fingers absently stroked Jonah's tiny fist as he slumbered, blissfully unaware of his parents' mounting fear. At exactly 2:13 a.m., Biscuit's nails clicked against the hardwood as he positioned himself at the basement door. His muscles tensed beneath his grizzled fur, hackles rising into a rigid line along his spine as he stared at the metal hatch in the floor. The torn ear from his earlier life twitched, his entire body transforming into a living alarm system. "There he goes again," Rowan whispered, cradling Jonah against her chest protectively. "Right on schedule. Same time as last night, almost to the minute." Silas gripped a baseball bat, his knuckles white around the handle as he moved cautiously toward the dog. His tired eyes narrowed in concentration. "What do you see? Boy? What's got you so worked up?" Biscuit's low growl rumbled through the darkness, a primal warning that raised goosebumps along Rowan's arms. He pawed frantically at the edge of the hatch, his claws leaving fresh marks alongside dozens of older scratches that scored the metal surface. "Look at this," Silas said, crouching down with his flashlight, the beam illuminating his worried expression. "He's been trying to warn us about the basement for weeks." The light swept across deep grooves in the hatch's surface, silent testament to Biscuit's persistent efforts to alert them to the danger lurking below. "All this time," Rowan murmured, guilt washing over her face. "We thought he was just being anxious around Jonah. But he was trying to protect us." Rowan carefully settled Jonah in his carrier, tucking his blanket around his tiny body and positioning him close as she joined them at the hatch. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice was steel. "Open it." Silas hesitated, broad shoulders tensing. "Maybe we should wait for— Open it now, while we know they're down there," Rowan insisted, her sharp-featured face set with determination. "I'm tired of being afraid in our own home." With trembling hands, Silas gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch creaked open with a sound like an old man's complaint, revealing concrete steps descending into impenetrable darkness. Their flashlight beams cut through the gloom like searchlights, catching on fresh mud tracked across the steps, unmistakable evidence of recent intrusion. "Someone's definitely been here," Silas muttered, the reality of the violation settling over him like a physical weight. "These tracks weren't here yesterday when I grabbed the winter blankets." Biscuit pushed past them, leading the way down with confident purpose. His nose worked frantically, tracing invisible trails of scent that only he could detect. Near the bottom step, something white caught in the beam of Rowan's light. She bent down, adrenaline sharpening her senses as she examined a torn piece of plastic wedged in a crack between the concrete steps. "It's part of a badge sleeve," she said, carefully working it free with fingernails bitten to the quick. "Look, there's a partial number sequence here, and that's definitely a hospital logo in the corner. See the caduceus symbol?" Silas leaned in closer, his breath warm against her shoulder, as he took several photos with his phone, capturing the mud prints and the badge fragment from multiple angles. The flash illuminated the damp basement walls in stark bursts. "We need to figure out where this came from, and who it belongs to." "Malik," Rowan said immediately, her intuition clicking the pieces into place. "He can trace it. He's got contacts in every hospital system in the county." They spent the rest of the night in the living room, doors triple-checked and lights blazing against the darkness. Biscuit positioned himself at Jonah's carrier, his body forming a living shield. As soon as the first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, Rowan called Malik Ortega, an old friend who'd helped her through community college, and now worked as a data security consultant for several local hospitals. "Can you meet us at 10? She asked, pacing the living room floor. "It's important, Mal. Not something I can explain over the phone." Malik arrived at their house right on time, his usual cheerful expression turning deadly serious as they showed him the evidence. His eyes widened as he examined the badge fragment carefully, holding it up to the morning light streaming through the windows. "This is definitely from County General," he said, running a finger over the torn plastic. "I recognize the hologram pattern. They updated their security badges last quarter. And these numbers..." He squinted at the partial sequence, his forehead furrowing in concentration. "I can run this through some databases, see what comes up. Might give us a department, maybe even a name if we're lucky." "How long will it take?" Rowan asked, bouncing Jonah gently as he began to fuss. Dark circles underlined her eyes, but her gaze remained sharp and focused. "Give me a few hours. I'll need to cross-reference employee records with building access logs. Might be able to narrow it down to specific departments based on the badge type. See this color coding on the edge? That limits it somewhat already." Silas handed him the phone with the photos, his large hands surprisingly steady now. "There's mud, too, if that helps track movement patterns. It looks distinctive, maybe from a construction site?" "Every piece helps," Malik said, pocketing the evidence carefully in a small evidence bag he'd brought. "I've got some friends in the hospital security office who owe me favors. I'll call as soon as I find anything, and I promise I'll be discreet." After he left, Rowan and Silas looked at each other, exhaustion etched in the lines around their eyes, but determination radiating from both their postures. Biscuit lay between them on the floor, his body still oriented toward the basement door with unwavering focus, a living barrier against whatever threat lurked beyond. "What do you think they want?" Silas asked quietly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Why our house? Why now?" Rowan stroked Jonah's velvet cheek as he slept, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful ignorance of the danger surrounding him. Her voice, when it came, carried the quiet certainty of a mother defending her child. "I don't know, but they picked the wrong family to mess with. Nobody threatens my baby and gets away with it." The partial badge felt like their first real clue, a tangible connection to whoever was targeting their home, a thread they could follow back to the source. Now they just had to wait for Malik's call, hoping the numbers would lead them to answers before whoever had been visiting their basement returned. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen, windows casting long golden rectangles across the worn linoleum as Rowan's phone buzzed. Malik's name flashed on the screen, and she grabbed it with such urgency her knuckles whitened before the first ring ended. "I found something," Malik said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "The badge fragment, it's from St. Bridget's maternity ward, matched to an orderly named Peter Connolly." Rowan's hand tightened on the phone until her fingers ached. The kitchen suddenly felt too warm, the air too thick. "Are you sure? Absolutely sure?" "Positive. The number sequence lines up perfectly with their employee ID system. I cross-referenced it twice." Malik paused. He worked night shifts exclusively in the maternity wing, 3 years on staff. Silas leaned in close enough that Rowan could feel his warm breath on her cheek, his broad shoulder pressing firmly against hers. The scent of sawdust still clung to his work clothes. "Did you get an address? Anything we can use?" "Nothing current," Malik replied, frustration evident in his tone. "His personnel file shows 3 addresses in 5 years, but the last one's a dead end. Empty apartment, new tenants moved in. But he was definitely employed there until about 4 months ago. Left suddenly, according to my source." After thanking Malik profusely, Rowan immediately punched in St. Bridget's main number, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed each digit. She was transferred 3 times, each new voice more dismissive than the last, before finally reaching the night supervisor's office at precisely 3:30 p.m. The clock's minute hand seemed to mock her impatience. "I'm calling about Peter Connolly," Rowan said, struggling to keep her voice steady, fighting the tremor that threatened to betray her desperation. "Mr. Connolly no longer works here," the supervisor replied, with a flat, bureaucratic tone that suggested she'd rehearsed this response. "He resigned his position 4 months ago. There's really nothing else I can tell you." "Did he leave a forwarding address? A phone number? This is important. Life or death important." Rowan pressed, gripping the counter edge with her free hand. "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss former employees or their personal information. Hospital policy." The woman's voice turned colder with each word. "I really must insist." The line went dead with an abrupt click. Rowan pulled the phone from her ear and stared at it in mounting frustration, resisting the urge to hurl it against the wall. "We need to go there," she said to Silas, already reaching for her keys hanging by the door. "Now, today, I need to see these people face to face." They arrived at St. Bridget's just after 6 p.m., having dropped Jonah with Rosa for an emergency babysit. The imposing building's weathered brick facade glowed burnt orange in the setting sun, its windows reflecting fire. The reception area smelled overwhelmingly of harsh antiseptic, barely masking something unpleasant. Beneath, mixed with the cloying sweetness of artificial flowers wilting in their vases. A thin-faced woman with pinched lips looked up from behind the polished reception desk. Her name badge read, "Margaret Winters, Administrative Services." "Can I help you?" she asked, the words practiced but hollow. "We need information about Peter Connolly," Rowan said, leaning forward slightly, her palms flat against the cool surface of the desk. "It's urgent." The receptionist's expression hardened immediately, lips thinning to a bloodless line. "As I'm sure you were already told on the phone, we cannot discuss former employees. It's against hospital policy and potentially violates privacy laws." Each word dropped like a stone. "Someone broke into our house," Silas cut in, his normally quiet voice rising with unusual intensity. He pulled the plastic evidence bag from his pocket. "We found his hospital ID badge, right there, by our baby's crib." Margaret's eyes flickered briefly to the badge before her professional mask slipped firmly back into place. "If you have concerns about criminal activity, I suggest you contact the police." The woman's tone made it crystal clear the conversation was over. Her fingers hovered meaningfully over what was likely a security button. They were still sitting in the car in the hospital's sprawling parking lot, the engine idling while they heatedly debated their next move, when Rowan's phone rang again. She almost ignored it, but the screen showed Rosa Alvarez from next door. "I saw you leaving earlier in such a rush," Rosa said, concern evident in her heavily accented voice. "Everything okay with the baby, with you?" Rowan hesitated, her throat tight, then decided to confide in her neighbor. 20 minutes later, they were sitting at Rosa's well-worn kitchen table, steam rising from thick ceramic mugs of strong, sweet coffee. The older woman's face grew increasingly grave as they explained the situation, the deep lines around her mouth deepening with every detail they shared. "St. Bridget's," Rosa muttered, shaking her head slowly, her weathered hands fidgeting with a rosary pulled from her apron pocket. "There were rumors, years ago. Bad rumors. Babies gone quiet in the night. Young mothers who came home empty-handed told their little ones didn't make it when they seemed perfectly healthy before." She crossed herself deliberately, the motion practiced and reverent. "Nothing ever proved, you understand. Official records all clean. But people talked. My sister's friend lost twins there in '98. Healthy pregnancy then, poof, complications they couldn't explain." Rowan felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her lightheaded and nauseated. Her coffee sat untouched, growing cold. "Why didn't anyone investigate? How could this just be ignored?" "Some tried. A few families filed complaints. One reporter started asking questions." Rosa's eyes darkened with remembered anger. Hospital had good lawyers, powerful friends downtown, in the state capital. Everything got buried one way or another. The reporter took a job in another state suddenly. Very suddenly. She reached across the scarred wooden table, her fingers surprisingly strong as they squeezed Rowan's trembling hand. Be careful, Mihija. These people, they protect their own. But don't give up. That baby needs you fighting. Back home, Rowan paced the perimeter of the nursery, while Silas gently laid Jonah down for the night, the baby's eyelids already heavy with sleep. Biscuit watched with unwavering attention from his self-appointed post by the door, his one torn ear twitching at every sound from outside, his massive body tense and ready. I'm filing a formal complaint first thing tomorrow, she said when Silas finally joined her, her voice quiet but vibrating with intensity. The hospital, the medical board, the state licensing authority, everyone I can think of. Someone has to listen. Someone has to care that there's a man with hospital access sneaking into people's homes. The unanswered questions haunted her like shadows growing longer as night fell. Why their house specifically? Why target Jonah when there were dozens of newborns in the neighborhood? What connection did a former hospital orderly have to their family that would drive him to such risk? The fragmented puzzle made her head throb, but she was determined to assemble every piece, no matter how jagged the edges. Rosa's words echoed persistently in her mind. Baby's gone quiet in the night. The thought sent icy chills cascading down her spine as she stood over Jonah's crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep, his perfect fingers curled into miniature fists. Whatever was happening, whatever sick game was being played, she would protect her son. The fierce certainty of this burned in her chest like a flame that would never extinguish. No matter what it took, no matter who she had to fight, no matter what secrets she had to uncover. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Lieutenant Harmon's desk as Rowan spread out her documentation at 9:00 a.m. sharp. She'd organized everything meticulously, the video footage, photos of the basement hatch, and the hospital badge fragment information. I understand your concern, Mrs. Hargrove, Lieutenant Harmon said, flipping through her papers. But there are jurisdictional issues here. The hospital falls under county authority, not city. Someone broke into my house, Rowan insisted. That's your jurisdiction. Lieutenant Harmon nodded slowly. I'll reopen the file, but without more evidence linking this Connolly directly to the break-in. After leaving the station, Rowan called the Family Safety Advocacy Hotline from her car. The counselor listened carefully and connected her with their legal team, but warned that hospital cases often hit walls of bureaucracy and confidentiality laws. That afternoon, Rowan sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from St. Bridget's, waiting. Her contact, a nurse named Lena, had insisted on meeting off hospital grounds. The woman who slid into the seat across from her looked around nervously before speaking. I can't stay long, she said quietly. But I saw your complaint come through channels this morning. There's something you should see. Lena pulled a folded paper from her purse, a photocopied discharge form. Look at the signatures, she whispered. Compare the dates. Rowan studied the document. The attending physician's signature appeared identical on multiple lines, down to the smallest detail, as if copied and pasted. That's not possible with handwritten signatures, Lena said, and these aren't the only ones. But if anyone asks, you didn't get this from me. I have kids to think about. Back home that evening, Silas paced the kitchen while Rowan examined the form for the 100th time. We need to be smart about this, he said at 8:00 p.m., running his hands through his hair. These people clearly have resources, connections. What if they retaliate? They're already targeting us, Rowan countered. We need to find others who've dealt with them. She opened her laptop and navigated to the local parenting forum. With careful editing to protect their privacy, she posted the security footage, showing the shadowy figure entering their basement. "Has anyone else experienced something similar?" she wrote, "particularly families who delivered at St. Bridget's." "This is dangerous," Silas protested. "What if it makes things worse?" But Rowan was already hitting post. "What's worse than someone trying to take our baby?" she asked quietly. "We need answers, Silas, and we need them before he comes back." She watched the view counter tick upward as parents across the city began to see her post. Someone out there had to know something. Someone had to have seen similar patterns. All they needed was one witness willing to speak up. The notification pinged on Rowan's phone. Another comment on her forum post. This one from user NightShiftEyes89. Malik had been monitoring the thread, filtering through the concerned parents and conspiracy theorists. "This one's different," Malik said during their video call. "They mentioned something specific, a private discharge processed exactly 2 nights after Jonah was born. The timing matches." Rowan leaned closer to her screen. "Can you trace the user?" "Already did. They're using a public library computer, but they've agreed to meet. Says they used to volunteer at St. Bridget's." The diner was nearly empty at 2 p.m. when Rowan slid into a booth. A woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair approached, carrying a tote bag full of papers. "I'm Margaret," she said quietly, sitting down. "I volunteered in records for 6 years at St. Bridget's. What I saw, well, it's why I left." Margaret pulled out a small notebook. There was a system of lockers in the basement, near the old pharmacy storage. They called them transfer units, supposedly for confidential medical supplies between shifts. But I noticed patterns. She slid the notebook across the table. Inside were dates, times, and locker numbers. Every private discharge corresponded with a locker activation, always at night, always with minimal documentation. Rowan's hands shook as she photographed the pages. "Why didn't you report it?" "I tried. Administration said I was confused, that I was misinterpreting routine procedures. Then my grandson got sick, needed specialized care. Suddenly his insurance claim started having problems." Margaret's voice hardened. The message was clear. Back home, Rowan created a detailed spreadsheet. She plotted every event from Jonah's birth through their discharge, cross-referencing with Margaret's locker records. Patterns emerged, staff changes at specific times, unusual gaps in the visitor log, missing security footage from certain hallways. Over the next 3 days, she dove deeper. Monday, calls to former patients who delivered around the same dates as suspicious locker activities. Tuesday, researching hospital board members and their connections. Wednesday, mapping staff rotations against Margaret's documentation. "Look at this," she told Silas, pointing to her timeline. "The night we were discharged, there were 3 locker activations in 30 minutes, but the hospital only recorded 1 official discharge that entire day." She'd color-coded everything, red for confirmed irregularities, yellow for suspicious patterns, green for verified normal activities. The red marks clustered around specific times, specific staff members. "It's not random," she said, tracing the patterns. "Someone's been using this system for years. The question is, for what?" Malik helped her dig through public records, cross-referencing names and dates. Each piece they uncovered fit into an increasingly disturbing puzzle. But they needed more. Something concrete that would force authorities to act. The timeline sprawled across their dining room wall now, a web of connections and questions. At its center, the night of Jonah's birth, and the shadowy figure who'd tried to reach his crib. "We need those records," Rowan insisted, standing in Lieutenant Harmon's office. The timeline printouts trembled in her hands. "There's a pattern here that goes back years." Lieutenant Harmon leaned back in his chair, his expression sympathetic but firm. Without a court order, I can't compel the hospital to release anything. You'll need a lawyer for that. Silas placed a steadying hand on Rowan's shoulder. Who would you recommend? They found themselves in a cramped office above a pizza shop that afternoon. Maris Klein's desk was buried under case files, but her eyes were sharp as she reviewed their evidence. The footage is compelling, Maris said, adjusting her reading glasses. But hospitals have deep pockets and deeper lawyers. We need something absolutely bulletproof before we file anything. Rowan's shoulders slumped. So we're stuck? Not stuck, just cautious. Maris tapped the timeline. Keep gathering evidence, document everything. Later that morning, Rosa knocked on their door. I have someone you need to meet, she said, ushering in a tall woman with braided hair and a press badge. Benica Hale, the woman introduced herself. I cover healthcare and corruption for the Tribune. Rosa told me about your situation. Rowan spread out her research on the coffee table. Benica's eyes widened as she took in the scope of their investigation. This is extensive, she said, examining Margaret's notebook. Do you have the original footage from the break-in attempts? Everything's backed up, Rowan assured her, including timestamps and metadata. That night, Rowan lay awake, watching the bedroom clock. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, Biscuit's nails clicked against the hardwood. Instead of calling Silas, she slipped out of bed and followed. The shepherd mix stood rigid by the nursery door, his hackles raised. Then he turned, padding silently toward the basement. Rowan followed, her heart pounding. Biscuit stopped at the hatch, pawing at the edge. Through the window, movement caught Rowan's eye. A shadow crossed the yard at 2:40, disappearing behind the fence. Her hands shaking, Rowan checked the security camera feed on her phone. The figure was there, a man in dark clothes, watching their house. The next morning, she copied all the footage onto a flash drive. Benica met her at a coffee shop, her laptop ready. This is gold, the reporter said, reviewing the new video. Combined with your timeline and Margaret's records, we might have something here. Rowan wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, seeking warmth. Will it be enough? It's a start, Benica said, her eyes still on the footage. And sometimes that's all we need. The screen of Benica's laptop cast a blue glow across her face as she scrolled through employment records. Look at this pattern, she said, turning the display toward Rowan. Peter Connolly worked nights in the maternity ward from 2017 to 2022. During his shifts, there were 16 private patient transfers. Rowan leaned closer, squinting at the spreadsheet. What does private patient mean exactly? That's where it gets interesting. Benica pulled up another window. These patients were registered under companies like Sunrise Holdings and Evergreen Care Solutions. Shell companies, all of them. And guess who they trace back to? She clicked through corporate filings until a familiar name appeared, Gideon Whitaker Development Group. Silas, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Whitaker? His voice was strained. I need to tell you something, Rowan. She turned to face her husband. What is it? When I was working as a building inspector, I handled several projects for Whitaker's firm, including the subdivision they built near St. Bridget's. He swallowed hard. They also funded the new maternity wing. Their name is on the dedication plaque. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. Why didn't you mention this before? I didn't think it was connected. But now, he gestured at the screen. This is bigger than we thought. Over the next week, Benica and Rowan worked methodically. Monday morning, they requested shipping manifests for the hospital's loading dock. By Tuesday afternoon, they had dates matching the locker usage. Look here, Benica said on Wednesday, pointing to bank statements. Large transfers from Whitaker's shell companies to offshore accounts, always 3 days after a private discharge. Thursday brought another piece of the puzzle when Rosa connected them with a former parking attendant. Those nights, there was always a black SUV, he told them over coffee. Same spot, same time. Never logged in the system. Friday morning, Malik called with data from traffic cameras. The vehicle matches descriptions from 3 other hospitals in the region, all with Whitaker-funded wings. Rowan spent Saturday creating a detailed timeline, color-coding each type of evidence: red for financial transactions, blue for hospital records, green for witness statements. The pattern was undeniable. "We need to move carefully," Benica warned during their Sunday meeting. "Whitaker has connections everywhere. One wrong step and evidence could disappear." They gathered in Benica's office Monday morning, spreading documents across her desk. "The bank transfers are our strongest lead," she said. "If we can prove the money moved from these shell companies to purchase black market adoptions—" "How do we get proof?" Rowan asked, bouncing a fussy Jonah on her hip. "I have contacts at 3 different banks," Benica replied. "They're willing to help, but we need to be discreet. These records could vanish if Whitaker suspects we're looking." Tuesday evening, Silas brought home blueprints of the hospital's renovation. "The new wing has a separate loading dock," he explained. "Perfect for moving things, or people, without being seen." By Wednesday night, they had compiled a comprehensive file. Employment records, bank statements, building permits, and witness testimonies. Each piece on its own meant little. Together, they told a disturbing story. "The shipping receipts are the key," Benica said Thursday morning, spreading papers across her kitchen table. "They show regular deliveries of medical supplies that don't appear in the hospital's inventory, always on nights when there were private discharges." Rowan stared at the documents, her throat tight. "All those babies. Where did they go?" "That's our next step," Benica replied, her voice gentle but determined. "Follow the money, find the destination. The bank records show transfers to accounts in 3 different countries. We start there." The late morning sun beat down on Rowan's car as she parked behind the abandoned strip mall. From here, they had a clear view of the storage lockers without being obvious. Malik sat in the passenger seat, his camera ready with a telephoto lens. In the back, Rosa and Silas watched through binoculars. "Anything yet?" Rowan whispered, though there was no need to be quiet inside the car. "Nothing," Malik replied, adjusting his camera settings. "But if Benica's tip is right, someone should show up soon." Rosa checked her watch. "It's 11:30. The exchange is supposed to happen at 11:45. They'd chosen their spot carefully. The storage facility sat at the edge of town, its faded blue doors facing away from the main road. Unit 23, their target, was visible, but not too close to draw attention. Silas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Maybe we should have brought Benica." "She's keeping Lieutenant Harmon updated," Rowan reminded him. "We need someone working the official channels." At 11:42, a white van pulled into the lot. A man in hospital scrubs stepped out, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. Malik's camera clicked rapidly. "That's the orderly from the security footage," Rosa whispered. "The one who works Tuesday nights." They watched as he approached Unit 23, looked around quickly, and unlocked it. The package disappeared inside. He was gone in less than a minute. "Got the plates," Malik said, reviewing his photos. "Clear shots of his face, too." 15 minutes later, a black SUV arrived. A woman in business attire retrieved the package and left. More photos, more license plates, all of it documented. Rowan's hands shook as she called Lieutenant Harmon. "We have evidence of an exchange. Photos, license plates, everything." "Mrs. Hargrove," his voice crackled through the speaker. "I understand your concern, but what? We just witnessed a suspicious exchange at the same location linked to multiple cases. A long pause. I'll file a follow-up report. Send me what you have. That evening, while putting Jonah down for bed, Rowan's phone buzzed with news alerts. Gideon Whitaker Development Group had issued a press release. St. Bridget's Hospital has served our community with distinction for over 50 years, she read aloud to Silas. Recent baseless accusations threaten to undermine their dedicated staff and the thousands of families who trust their care. More notifications followed. Local news stations were running segments questioning her credibility. Online comments called her paranoid, attention-seeking, unstable. Maybe we should step back, Silas suggested quietly. Just for a while. Let things cool down. Rowan looked at him sharply. Cool down? While they're trying to discredit us? They're powerful people, Rowan. Whitaker has friends at every newspaper, every TV station. So we should just give up? Let them keep operating? Silas ran his hands through his hair. I'm scared, okay? What if they come after us? After Jonah? They already did, Rowan replied, her voice steady. That's why we can't stop. Not now. Not ever. She walked to the nursery, window, looking out at the quiet street. The moon cast long shadows across their front yard, where somewhere below, a basement hatch held secrets they were finally beginning to uncover. I won't back down, she said firmly. We have proof now, real proof, and I'm going to make sure everyone sees it. The media pressure continued to build. Local morning shows ran segments about mommy paranoia. Online trolls flooded her social media. But Rowan stood firm, knowing that somewhere in those storage lockers, in those bank transfers, in those carefully hidden records, lay the truth she'd been fighting to expose. Rowan's phone buzzed at 9 a.m, a text from Lena. They suspended me. Need to talk. Urgent. Her heart sank. After their stakeout yesterday, she'd known there would be consequences, but this felt personal, targeted. She arranged to meet Lena at a small coffee shop 3 towns over. The drive gave her time to think, to process the whirlwind of the past few days. The storage locker photos, the press release, the mounting pressure. At 3 o'clock sharp, Lena slipped into the booth across from Rowan. Her usual crisp nurse's scrubs were replaced by civilian clothes, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. They're saying I violated confidentiality protocols, Lena said quietly, wrapping her hands around an untouched coffee. But that's not the real reason. They know I helped you. I'm so sorry, Rowan whispered. Lena shook her head. Don't be. What they're doing, it's wrong, and it's bigger than we thought. She glanced around before pulling out a folder. Look at these. Inside were dozens of discharge forms. Each bore the same flowing signature at the bottom. These span 2 years, Lena explained. Different doctors, different shifts. But see the signature? They're identical. Not similar. Identical. They used a template. Rowan studied the papers. The signature loops matched perfectly, down to the tiniest detail. Mass-produced forgeries. Exactly. They processed these special cases through a separate system. Always at night, always with the same staff. Lena's voice shook. I should have spoken up sooner. That evening, Rowan met Benica at her office. The reporter's desk was buried under stacks of documents and post-it notes. This is dynamite, Benica said, examining the discharge forms. But the local authorities are compromised. We need to go higher. State level? I know someone in the Child Welfare Investigation Unit. She's been looking for something concrete on Whitaker for years. They spent hours organizing their evidence, the nanny cam footage, the storage locker photos, the forged signatures, bank records showing suspicious patterns. But Whitaker's influence ran deep. 2 days later, the district attorney's office announced they were reviewing all pending subpoenas related to ongoing healthcare investigations. "They're stonewalling us," Benica fumed over the phone. "Every legal avenue we try, they block it." The next morning, Rowan found herself the target of a vicious op-ed in the local paper. "Conspiracy theories threaten healthcare heroes," the headline blazed. The article painted her as an unstable mother, seeing threats in shadows. She read it at her kitchen table, hands trembling. Words jumped out. Paranoid, attention-seeking, dangerous accusations. Rosa brought over banana bread and a shoulder to cry on. "They're scared," she said firmly. "You're getting too close." Malik worked his tech magic, tracking the op-ed's origin to a PR firm on Whitaker's payroll. But the damage was spreading. Local mom groups uninvited her. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. "We knew they'd fight back," Benica reminded her, "but we have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth, and enough evidence to prove it." 5 days after the storage locker stakeout, Rowan sat in her living room surrounded by their case files. The forged signatures, the suspicious transfers, the timeline of private discharges that matched missing babies. Outside, reporters occasionally drove by, hoping for a statement. But she wasn't giving up. Each piece of evidence, each connection they uncovered, brought them closer to exposing the truth. Whatever it cost her reputation, whatever friends she lost, she knew this fight mattered. Not just for Jonah, but for every family whose trust had been betrayed. The state investigator was reviewing their evidence. Soon, the story would break wide open. Whitaker's influence couldn't reach everywhere. The truth would come out. She just had to stay strong until then. Benica's hand shook as she pressed play on the audio file. The recording crackled with late-night hospital ambient noise, the hum of machines, distant footsteps, the soft beep of monitors. "To this week," a female voice said. "Premium placement, very discreet clients." "Same process?" A man's voice, tired but businesslike. "Yes, transfer at 3, paperwork by 5. The usual fee structure." Rowan leaned closer to Benica's laptop, her breath catching. The female voice was familiar, warmly professional, carefully modulated. She'd heard it at hospital fundraisers, on local news segments about infant care. "That's Elise Pritchard," she whispered. Benica nodded grimly. "The recording's from 2 nights ago, around 2 in the morning. One of the night nurses finally agreed to wear a wire." The team sat in stunned silence. Malik stopped typing. Rosa covered her mouth with her hand. Even Silas, who'd grown increasingly cautious about their investigation, looked shocked. Elise Pritchard, the hospital's beloved neonatal advocate, the woman who'd spent 20 years building programs for at-risk mothers, who'd won humanitarian awards, whose picture hung in the hospital lobby showing her cradling premature twins. "Play it again," Rowan said. They listened as Elise calmly discussed placement logistics and client specifications, like she was arranging furniture delivery, not trafficking babies. Her voice never lost its professional warmth, even while negotiating prices. "The whole time," Rosa breathed, "she was the broker." Malik pulled up Elise's public profile. "Look at this. She's on every hospital committee. She has access to all the maternity records, all the security protocols." "The perfect cover," Benica said. "Who would question the woman who supposedly dedicated her life to helping mothers and babies?" Rowan felt sick. She remembered meeting Elise during her pregnancy, how reassuring she'd been, how she'd seemed to radiate compassion and competence. All an act. At 10 o'clock that morning, Rowan walked into Elise's office without an appointment. The woman looked up from her desk, that practiced warm smile appearing automatically. "Rowan, what a lovely surprise. How's little Jonah?" "Drop the act," Rowan said quietly. We have the recording." The smile didn't waver, but something shifted in Elise's eyes. A coldness, a calculation. "I'm not sure what you mean. 2 nights ago, 2 in the morning. Ring any bells?" Now the smile did fade, replaced by something harder. "You should be very careful about making accusations without proof." "We have proof. Your voice, your words, arranging to sell babies to the highest bidder." Elise leaned back in her chair, studying Rowan with new interest. "You know, I actually admire your determination, but you're in over your head." "People trusted you," Rowan said, her voice shaking. "Mothers trusted you. And their babies went to loving homes with families who could provide everything they needed. Everyone wins. Except the mothers you stole from." Elise's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Do you really think anything will come of this? Ask yourself who signs the hospital's biggest checks, who funds the police pension fund, who owns half the real estate in this city?" "Whitaker." "Smart girl." Elise stood, smoothing her blazer. "This is bigger than you understand. The people involved, they don't lose. Ever." The threat was clear, but Rowan held her ground. "Neither do I. We'll see." Elise's warm smile returned, perfectly practiced. "Give Jonah a kiss for me." Rowan's hands were shaking as she left the office. In the parking lot, she called Benica. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "Whitaker isn't just covering this up. He's actively involved. The whole system is corrupted." "The recording proves Elise is the broker," Benica replied. "That's our way in." But Rowan understood now why their local efforts had been blocked at every turn. This wasn't just about one hospital or one corrupt administrator. The conspiracy reached into the heart of the city's power structure, protected by money and influence at every level. The manila envelope arrived at 8 in the morning. Rowan's hands trembled as she read the official letterhead. Child Welfare Review Board, Emergency Petition. She sank into a kitchen chair, scanning the documents with growing horror. The petition questioned her mental stability, citing paranoid behavior and reckless accusations against respected community figures. Attached were sworn statements from hospital staff describing her as unstable and potentially dangerous to her infant. "They're trying to take Jonah," she whispered when Silas came downstairs. His face went pale. "They can't do that." "They're already doing it." She pushed the papers toward him. "Look who signed the witness statements. All Whitaker Foundation grant recipients." The phone rang. Maris Klein, their legal aid attorney. "I'm filing emergency motions to block this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "But Rowan, they're moving fast. The review board wants an emergency hearing tomorrow." Benica called next. "I'm running the story tonight. Full expose on Whitaker's connection to the hospital, the fake adoptions, everything." But what?" "They're going to paint you as unstable. They've got people lined up to testify that you're having paranoid delusions." Rowan held Jonah closer, breathing in his sweet baby smell. "They won't take him from me. I won't let them." The day passed in a blur of legal calls and emergency meetings. By evening, Rowan felt stretched to breaking point. Silas worked from home, hovering anxiously nearby. At 1:30 in the morning, Biscuit's low growl pulled Rowan from a fitful sleep. The dog stood at the bedroom window, hackles raised. A sharp crack split the night. Glass shattered. Biscuit yelped, a high, pained sound that turned Rowan's blood to ice. "Biscuit!" She scrambled out of bed as Silas bolted upright. The dog lay crumpled by the window, blood matting his grizzled fur. Through the broken pane, Rowan glimpsed a shadow moving in the yard. "Call 911!" she shouted to Silas, dropping to her knees beside Biscuit. The dog's breathing was ragged, but his tail thumped weakly against the floor when she touched him. The next hours were a nightmare blur. The emergency vet worked quickly, extracting the bullet that had grazed Biscuit's shoulder. "He was lucky," the vet said. "An inch to the left." Rowan sat on the floor of the exam room, her hand buried in Biscuit's fur. The dog's eyes never left her face. "They tried to kill him," she said when they got home. "They tried to kill our dog." Silas paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. He looked haunted, the last of his hesitation finally stripped away. "This ends now," he said. "I'm done playing it safe. I'm done worrying about my job or what people will think." He knelt in front of Rowan, taking her hands. "Whatever it takes, whatever you need, I'm with you. All the way." Rowan squeezed his hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They're trying to take our baby." "They won't." Silas's voice was fierce. "We'll fight them, all of us. You, me, Benica, Malik, Rosa. They think they can bully us into silence? They just showed us exactly what they're capable of. No more holding back." Biscuit limped over, pressing against their legs. Even wounded, he was still trying to protect them. "We need to move fast," Silas said, "before they can hurt anyone else." Rowan nodded, her resolve hardening. The custody hearing loomed tomorrow, but now she knew, really knew, what they were fighting against, and she was ready. The storage facility's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Rowan checked her phone. 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes until the arranged meeting. "Testing, testing," Malik's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Camera feed is live and streaming to 3 secure servers." From her position behind a stack of empty moving boxes, Rowan could see the facility's main corridor. Benica and State Investigator Chen waited in a surveillance van outside, monitoring multiple camera feeds. "Remember," Chen had briefed them earlier, "we need clear evidence of intent to arrange an illegal adoption. Get them to explicitly discuss payment and placement." Rowan touched the hidden camera pinned to her shirt. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. After what they'd done to Biscuit, after threatening to take Jonah, this was their chance to end it. At exactly 11 a.m., footsteps echoed through the corridor. 2 people approached, a woman in expensive business attire and a man wearing hospital scrubs under his jacket. "Mrs. Patterson?" the woman called out, using the fake name Rowan had given during their arranged call. Rowan stepped into view, forcing herself to appear nervous and uncertain. "Yes, that's me." The woman smiled professionally. "I'm Margaret Wells, and this is Dr. Andrews. We understand you're interested in a private adoption arrangement?" "Yes," Rowan whispered. "My husband and we can pay whatever's necessary." Dr. Andrews nodded approvingly. "Our fees start at $50,000, cash only. That includes all documentation and a clean placement history." "How quickly can you—" Rowan swallowed hard. "When can we get the baby?" "We have several options available next week," Margaret said smoothly. "The paperwork will show a standard hospital discharge. No questions asked, no trace back to you." Through her earpiece, Rowan heard Chen whisper, "Keep them talking about the process." "And the birth mothers?" Rowan asked. "Do they agree to this?" Margaret's smile tightened. "Everything is handled through proper channels. Mr. Whitaker's organization ensures complete discretion." The man shifted uneasily. "We should discuss details somewhere more private." "Actually," a new voice rang out, "this location is perfect." Lieutenant Harmon stepped into view, flanked by 2 state police officers. Behind them, Benica emerged with a camera crew, live streaming everything. Margaret Wells's professional mask cracketed. "This is entrapment." "No," Chen said, stepping forward and displaying his badge. This is a state-level investigation into child trafficking. We have your entire conversation recorded, plus documentation of 12 similar transactions. Mr. Whitaker's lawyers will—" Margaret began. "Will what?" Benica interrupted. "Hide this? Too late. 50,000 viewers are watching this live stream right now, including several federal agencies." Dr. Andrews broke first. "It was all organized through the foundation," he blurted. "They told us which babies to flag, how to falsify the paperwork. Whitaker's people handled everything." Margaret spun toward him. "Shut up, you fool!" But Andrews was already talking, spilling details about shell companies, falsified records, and payoff structures. Lieutenant Harmon looked sick as he read them their rights. Rowan watched it unfold, her hand pressed against her chest where a photo of Jonah rested in her pocket. Finally, they had proof. Proof that couldn't be buried or denied. From the corridor came the sound of more footsteps. Malik emerged, grinning as he held up his laptop. "Got it all," he said. "Every word, every admission backed up on secure servers. They can't make this disappear." Benica's camera captured everything. The arrests, the evidence bags, Margaret Wells's stony face as she was led away in handcuffs. Most importantly, it captured the moment Lieutenant Harmon turned to Rowan and said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. We'll need your full statement to build the case." State Investigator Chen nodded grimly. "This is just the beginning. We'll unravel every connection, every case. No one's going to take your baby, Mrs. Hargrove. In fact, you've probably saved a lot of other babies from being taken." Rowan felt tears spring to her eyes, but she blinked them back. There would be time for emotion later. Right now they had work to do. Through her earpiece, she heard Malik say, "Viewer count just hit 100,000. This story isn't going away." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across St. Bridget's Hospital as unmarked vehicles surrounded the building at precisely 4 o'clock. Rowan stood beside Silas, watching state investigators and federal agents move into position. Her hand found his, squeezing tight. "Ready?" she whispered. Silas nodded grimly. Beside them, Biscuit stood alert despite the white bandage still wrapped around his shoulder. His ears were forward, focused on the hospital entrance. "Move in," came the command over radios, and everything erupted into coordinated motion. Agents flooded through the main doors while others secured emergency exits. Rowan and Silas followed the main team, having been asked to identify key suspects. The hospital's regular activities ground to a halt as badges were flashed and warrants presented. They reached the administrative wing when the first resistance appeared. 2 burly men in dark suits, Whitaker's private security, moved to block the corridor. "This is private property," one began, but federal agents quickly surrounded them. "Federal warrant," the lead agent announced. "Step aside or face obstruction charges." These security men hesitated. Then one shoved Silas hard against the wall. Before anyone could react, 3 agents had the man pinned and cuffed, while others secured his partner. "Silas!" Rowan reached for him as he straightened, rubbing his shoulder. "I'm okay," he assured her. "Keep moving." They pressed forward with the team. Around them, agents were securing offices and gathering evidence. Medical records, computer hard drives, files marked private placement that would finally expose everything. A commotion erupted ahead. Someone was running. Biscuit's ears perked up, and before anyone could stop him, he bounded forward with surprising agility despite his injury. His bark echoed through the corridor as he cornered a man trying to slip through a service door. Peter Connolly, Rowan identified him for the agents, the man who had tried to take Jonah, who had hurt Biscuit. His face went pale as agents converged on him. They found Elise Pritchard in her office, calmly deleting files. She barely looked up as agents entered, her fingers still typing until they physically removed her from the keyboard. "You're making a terrible mistake," she said smoothly. "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Rowan replied, stepping into view. "And we have proof of everything you've done." For just a moment, Elise's composed facade cracked. Then she straightened her shoulders as she was cuffed. "Mr. Whitaker will handle this." "Mr. Whitaker can't help you now," said a federal agent, holding up a warrant. "His name's on here, too." That's when they heard him, Gideon Whitaker's commanding voice booming down the corridor as he arrived with his legal team. He stopped short at the sight of agents leading away his security staff. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Rowan stepped forward, meeting his thunderous gaze. "It's over, Mr. Whitaker. We have proof of everything. The fake adoptions, the bribes, the threats, all of it." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, young woman." "No," Rowan said firmly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. A mother protecting her child. And now everyone will know what you tried to do to my son." Whitaker moved toward her, but Biscuit was there instantly, placing himself between them with a low growl. His bandage didn't make him any less intimidating. Federal agents stepped in, producing their warrant. "Gideon Whitaker, we have documentation of your involvement in an illegal adoption trafficking ring. Please come with us." "My lawyers will," he began. "Your lawyers can meet us at the federal building," the agent cut him off. "This warrant isn't local. You can't make it disappear." Rowan watched as they led him away, his face purple with rage. Around them, the operation continued. More staff members in handcuffs, more evidence being boxed up, more of the carefully constructed facade crumbling. Silas put his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he said softly. "You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected him, reaching down to scratch Biscuit's good shoulder. "All of us." Through the windows, they could see news vans arriving, reporters gathering. The story wouldn't be hidden this time. Everything would come to light. The next 14 days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. On Monday morning, the federal prosecutor's office announced formal indictments against 17 people connected to the trafficking ring, including Elise Pritchard and 6 hospital contractors. "Multiple felony counts," Maris explained to Rowan and Silas over coffee. "Conspiracy, fraud, falsifying medical records, they're not getting away with any of it." By Wednesday, 3 major corporations had severed ties with Whitaker's development firm. His carefully constructed empire began crumbling as investigative reporters uncovered offshore accounts and shell companies used to process payments for the private placements. "The money trail goes back almost a decade," Benica told them, spreading documents across their kitchen table. "Every fake adoption, every bribe, it's all here in black and white." On Friday, the hospital board announced Lena's reinstatement. She had agreed to testify as a key witness, bringing forward years of documentation she had secretly maintained. "I always knew something wasn't right," she said, hugging Rowan tightly. "Thank you for giving me the courage to speak up." The following Tuesday, the entire hospital board submitted their resignations under pressure from state regulators. An interim administration team began the painstaking process of reviewing every birth and adoption record from the past 5 years. 4 babies have already been reunited with their biological parents, Lieutenant Harmon reported, looking considerably more invested than he had at the beginning. The DNA testing is conclusive. The custody hearing on Thursday was almost anticlimactic. The judge dismissed Whitaker's allegations immediately, affirming Rowan's parental rights and issuing a permanent protective order against all involved parties. "They can't come near you or Jonah ever again," Maris assured them, closing her briefcase with satisfaction. That weekend, Silas and Rowan finally had a long overdue conversation on their back porch, while Biscuit dozed nearby, his shoulder healing nicely. "I'm sorry I doubted you at first." Silas said quietly. "I was so afraid of losing everything that I almost let them take what mattered most." Rowan squeezed his hand. "You came through when it counted. We're stronger now." The town itself seemed to be going through stages of grief. Denial gave way to anger as more details emerged. People who had trusted Elise, donated to her causes, invited her into their homes. They all struggled to reconcile the truth with their memories. Rosa organized a community meeting at the library. "We need to talk about this," she insisted, "about how we let ourselves be fooled and how we make sure it never happens again." By the end of the second week, 7 more indictments had been issued, including charges against 2 former hospital administrators. The state medical board launched a comprehensive review of St. Brigid's protocols. Lena had been appointed to a new oversight committee. "We're rebuilding from the ground up," she told Rowan. "Real security, real transparency, real protection for every baby and mother." Through it all, Jonah continued to grow and thrive, unaware of the storm that had raged around him. Each night at 2:13 a.m., Biscuit still made his rounds, but now he simply checked the nursery and returned to his bed, secure in the knowledge that his family was safe. The hatch in the basement had been permanently sealed. The scratches remained as a reminder, but they no longer carried any menace. They were proof of survival, of a mother's determination, and of justice finally served. Exactly 1 month after that first night when Biscuit had alerted them to danger, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Hargrove Mercer home. The morning held a peaceful quiet that felt both earned and precious. Jonah had finally settled into a regular sleep schedule, snoozing contentedly through breakfast time. His peaceful breaths carried through the baby monitor as Rowan sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth and stillness of the moment. At 9 o'clock, Biscuit dozed on his bed near the kitchen table. His shoulder had healed well, though a slight limp remained as a badge of his bravery. The grizzled shepherd mix would occasionally twitch in his sleep, but his dreams seemed peaceful now. "Look at this," Silas said softly, sliding his tablet across the table. On the screen was Beneka's latest article, a powerful 15,000-word piece that laid bare the full scope of the trafficking ring. The story had already won 2 investigative journalism awards and was being considered for a Pulitzer. Rowan skimmed the opening paragraphs, recognizing their story woven into the larger narrative of corruption and justice. Beneka had masterfully connected all the dots, from Whitaker's property developments to the hospital's compromised systems, following the money through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. "They're saying the civil suits against Whitaker could reach 9 figures, Silas commented, refilling their coffee cups. "The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has opened 3 new investigations just based on what they found in his records." The criminal probes had expanded far beyond their initial scope. Every week seemed to bring new revelations as more witnesses came forward, emboldened by the first successful prosecutions. Rowan set down the tablet, thinking about her testimony at the public hearing the previous week. The packed chamber had fallen silent as she described those terrifying nights, Biscuit's warnings, and the gradual unraveling of the conspiracy. The committee chair had praised her. Extraordinary competence and courage in the face of systematic corruption. "I never thought I'd say this," Silas mused, "but I'm glad you didn't listen to me about dropping it. You saw the truth when everyone else wanted to look away." Rowan smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those first arguments about her paranoid theories. The evidence had vindicated every instinct, every suspicion she'd pursued. Biscuit stirred in his sleep, his paw twitching. The bullet graze had left a small bare patch on his shoulder, but otherwise he'd recovered completely. The vet had called him a hero, and no one could disagree. Through the baby monitor, they heard Jonah beginning to wake. His soft coos carried through the speaker. normal baby sounds that no longer triggered anxiety or fear. Their home was truly their own again. Later that night, as the clock approached 10:13, Rowan stood in the nursery doorway, watching Jonah sleep. The loose floorboard had been replaced, the camera system upgraded, but they no longer needed constant surveillance. Justice had been served. Their family had been rebuilt, stronger than before. Biscuit padded up beside her, nudging her hand with his nose, their nightly ritual. Rowan stroked his head, grateful for his unwavering protection. She was no longer the fearful new mother who had doubted her own instincts. She had become something more, an unshakable protector who had faced down corruption and won. With a gentle click, she closed the nursery door. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.